Hi, good morning. My name is Laura. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for giving me the chance to talk, first of all, about our beautiful city of Hamburg, of course, and about our data governance in the digital age, as we call it in Hamburg. I will give a brief introduction to the city, to my organization where I work, what the focus of our work is. I will give you a brief introduction to what we aim at doing when we have our program Data Governance, and I will of course also talk about our current topics, our case studies, if you want to call them that way, and we have a strong focus on mobility topics, which, since we're a big city, that's one of the main issues, challenges that we have. So I would just quickly start by showing you very quickly where Hamburg is. I hope maybe some of you know we are a city-state, so we have states in Germany, and we are a city and a state. We are the second largest next to Berlin, so that's really quick about concerning that. We have round about 2 million people living in Hamburg. And our main, the main thing about the city is that we have a port which is in the city. So there's a lot of the wealth or the well-being of the city is because of the port. What is probably good to know is that Prague has been one of our sister cities since the 90s, but that's something that colleagues of mine work on, but I just wanted to mention it, that we have a history together. And I will dive into our topic of data governance. Why do we need a data governance? As I mentioned before, I work for the city. I work for the Senate Chancellery, which is the mayor's office, and I work in the Department for IT and Digitalization. So our mayor decided 4 years ago that we should have a department which is, which steers maybe all the digitalization projects and challenges that we deal with, and one of them is how to handle data, how to deal with data, how to get the most out of data in our city. So as you can see here, I can imagine many of you know already, we have data everywhere in our private lives, in our professional lives, especially during the pandemics. Everything we did was about data, and we ask questions like where and how is data generated, what happens with it, how can we use data in a meaningful way, so how can we use the data of the city, not just the public data, but also data in general that is generated in the city, and how can this be used for decision-making in the public sector. So we decided to develop a framework concerning all those questions. One of the main discussions we've had so far in the last few weeks or months in Germany and also in Hamburg was, do we need data strategies? Do we need artificial intelligence strategies, but also concerning data? And we, as the city, decided that we won't have a strategy in itself, because once we write it down, we would have to write a new one and a new one and a new one, because there's always something new going on or happening. So we decided to be a bit more flexible. So we want to define a cross-institutional data governance. So we want to include every entity of the city, not just from the public administration where I work in, but also the private sector, or as I mentioned, the commercial area like the port. Of course, there's a lot of data that is generated. It's not static, it's a dynamic plan or action plan that we created with procedures, guidelines, so that we have a common understanding of how we want to deal with data in our city. We want to give an orientation for all our colleagues, all the different actors and stakeholders, so we can again make sure that we can get the most out of data. So in general, as I mentioned already, data governance is a cross-institutional issue for our city, so we don't talk just about the administration, but also about the economic branch, about science, about civil society. So we want to get in touch with all those relevant stakeholders in our city. What is, I think, quite special for Hamburg is, which makes the work for us easier, is that we have a Transparency Act that has been developed in the beginning of the 2010 years. It was adopted by the Parliament in June 2012, and it came out of an initiative from the civil society, and it makes the core demand of this initiative was that internal information of the administration is made public. There has also been a reform in January 2020, which did not only include the information of the public sector itself, but also of the public companies, like universities or the Hamburg Port Authority. So all the data, all the information that is gained in those areas, according to certain guidelines, they have to be made transparent, which is pretty unique in Germany. But it makes the work for us and for our urban data platform, for example, very easy, because we have a legal basis that we can use to make the most out of data. We think that there are a lot of challenges that we have to address. We don't just talk about the chances. I think we all know that it's good to make the most out of data, and I just realized that I didn't translate it, but that's okay, I guess. So the challenges, of course, are that we have undefined data ownership, so the different roles that people have when it comes to dealing with data are not clear. We have a lack of clarity concerning data security. As I mentioned before, we have the Transparency Act, but then again, we of course have to make sure that we protect our data. We have a different interpretation of data, of statistics, depending on who's looking at the data and with which background. But of course, we have a lot of chances that we have to make use of, especially what I already mentioned, that you get fact-based decision-making, which we learned during the pandemics, especially, or once again, that is super important. And also when it comes to positioning ourselves in the market with companies, HR, there are a lot of opportunities for us as the public administration. So what we did when we talked with our colleagues from the different areas, we defined this triangle, this strategic triangle, which included a vision, a mission, and objectives. So we think that data is a major driving force for sustainable societal development and a future-oriented public sector in Germany. So we think that there's a lot of knowledge that we have to make use of, that we have to keep, so that we can make sustainable choices and that they are long-lasting. I won't go through everything right now, but I think one of the main issues that we have is our ambition to identify, share, use, and at the same time protect data is a challenge that we have to address, and which also I think that's where a lot of fear is coming from when it comes to handling data. Some of the objectives, so when it comes to operationalizing this very strategic approach is that we want to improve the quality of data. That's one of our focuses. We want to work with our colleagues from the different areas, like our mobility ministry, for example, our environment ministry, to make use cases. I will give you a short overview in a minute. And so, as I mentioned already before, we don't have a written down strategy for our data, but rather some principles and a framework that we work with. And we say that it's learning and an evolving system. It has to be adaptive. We want to focus on the practical use of designing principles or guidelines. And of course, since it's such a big approach that we have, this has to go step by step. So we want to make use of the different experiences that we make, and then slowly get the whole picture. So and then in the end, we aim at having different blueprints, especially because we think that many of the data challenges that are very similar. So if one organization has a challenge or a problem concerning the handling of data, we think in a different organization this will appear eventually as well. So again, that's when it comes to this whole sustainable approach. We have, this is what I call the toolbox of our data governance, where in an ideal world, in our ideal world, we can find all those different blueprints that I just talked about behind each of those puzzles. So I tell myself this is a puzzle, and if you turn around the card, you see different blueprints or different guidelines and principles that you can use when it comes to how do I deal with data ethics, what are the guidelines or the principles we can use when we talk about data integration or data use, quality management. And what you can see is that there's a kind of a logic how we ordered those puzzle pieces. So the top row is more those soft facts, but we think the most important aspects when we talk about data ethics, we talk a lot about not just collecting data as we see it, but we always ask, why do we need this data? What is the sense behind it? The culture, so we have our transparency law, but again, this is always something that we have to remind ourselves of. We want open data, we want transparency, we want to share our knowledge. So that's one of the aspects when it comes to culture. Roles, data competencies, that is something that is a big issue. We need a lot of expertise, like everyone else, I guess, but also we know that there's a lot of going on, and we need technical experts to help us with the challenges that we have. Yes, and then in the middle you see many of our technical aspects that we have to handle, and on the lower row we see aspects from a legal point of view that we of course don't want to ignore. So here I will I think this is my last slide, but here you see what we are currently working on with our partners. You see up here the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So we work here together with our environmental ministry, who want to set up or build a monitoring, so we can see where does Hamburg stand, where do we still have to work on, and of course, what do we need for that? We need data. For us, this is super interesting because it contains those goals, contain data from every part of living in Germany, in Hamburg, starting from we don't want any poverty, over equality, quality of water, infrastructure, climate change. So there's a wide variety of data that we can use when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals. B2G, business to government, is a big topic for us. The challenge, how can we make the most use of data in our city, not just concerning public data, but also data from private companies, is important for us. And we have EU regulation, like the Data Act, for example, or the Data Governance Act, who talk about this topic, but it's something that still has to be developed. So that's what we work on together with a newly developed institute, which you can see down here, the new institute. So we work together with experts from civil society and from the scientific branch, universities, to address those problems or those challenges that we have, also when it comes to well, B2G, but also G2B, maybe. How can we handle that aspect? Open Government Partnership is an international initiative that we work with, where it comes to open or transparent handling of or action in government and administration, and we want to make a contribution with a focus on data. Another topic is this whole idea around data intermediaries that we work on, which also includes how to get more out of data, how to get people to share data, not just from the economic branch, but also from civil society or from scientific actors. And we can use the instrument of data intermediaries for that, which is kind of similar to financial trusts. I think that's where the idea comes from. And now we talk about data trusts or data intermediaries. Especially, once again, when I talk about this B2G topic, for us it's interesting in this whole area of mobility. When we talk about shared mobility in Hamburg or about the different transportation providers that we have in Hamburg, this is one of the big topics when it comes to B2G, how to handle mobility in Hamburg, how to make it more accessible, how to make it available, how to meet the demands of the citizens of the city. So that's where we need those businesses who provide this mobility, but also who collect a lot of data, which is interesting for us as a city. So that's where this whole topic, especially B2G, is surrounded. And I think that was it. I think I brought some questions. I don't know if we do that now or if we do that later, but that's it from me.